I started with paragliding. Paragliding is taking off from mountains with a paraglider with the possibility to fly cross-country distance just with the use of thermals to soar. Also, different aerobatic maneuvers are possible with a paraglider. From there, I started with skydiving. On this picture, you can see there is a four-way skydive, 4 people flying together, and on the left-hand side, it's the camera flyer with the camera mounted to his helmet, so he can film the whole jump for the film itself and also for the judging. From regular relative skydiving, I went on to free flying. Free flying is more the three-dimensional skydiving. You can see the skydiver with the red suit. He's in a stand-up position. The one with the yellow-green suit, he's flying head down, and that's me in the background carving around the whole formation in free fall, also with the helmet cam to film this jump. From free flying, I went on to sky surfing. Sky surfing is skydiving with a...
I'd like to talk to you today about the human brain, which is what we do research on at the University of California. Just think about this problem for a second. Here's a lump of flesh, about 3 pounds, which you can hold in the palm of your hand, but it can contemplate the vastness of interstellar space. It can contemplate the meaning of infinity, ask questions about the meaning of its own existence, about the nature of God. And this is truly the most amazing thing in the world. It's the greatest mystery confronting human beings. How does this all come about? Well, the brain, as you know, is made up of neurons. Looking at neurons here, there are 100 billion neurons in the adult human brain, and each neuron makes something like 1,000 to 10,000 contacts with other neurons in the brain. And based on this, people have calculated that the number of permutations and combinations of brain activity exceeds the number of elementary particles in the universe. So how do you go about studying the brain? One approach is to look at patients who had lesions in different parts of the brain and study changes in their behavior. And this is what I spoke about in the last TED. Today I'll talk about a different approach, which is to put electrodes in different parts of the brain and actually record the activity of individual nerve cells in the brain, and sort of eavesdrop on the activity of nerve cells in the brain. Now, one recent discovery that has been made by researchers in Italy, in Parma, by
Well, we're here today to talk about the evolution of a puppet horse.
But actually, we're going to start this evolution with a hyena.
The ancestor of the horse. Okay, we'll do something with it. The hyena is the ancestor of the horse because it was part of a production called Faustus in Africa.
I was raised in Seoul, Korea, and I moved to New York City in 1999 to attend college. I was pre-med at the time, and I thought I'd become a surgeon because I was interested in anatomy, and dissecting animals really piqued my curiosity. And at the same time, I fell in love with New York City, and I started to realize that I could look at the whole city as a living organism. I wanted to dissect it and look into its unseen layers. And the way to do it for me was through artistic means. So eventually I decided to pursue an MFA instead of an MD. And in grad school I became interested in creatures that dwell in the hidden corners of the city. In New York City, rats are part of commuters' daily lives, and most people ignore them or are frightened of them. But I took a liking to them because they dwell on the fringes of society. And even though they're used in labs to promote human lives, they're also considered as pests. I also started looking around in the city and tried.
This is a photograph by the artist Michael Najjar, and it's real in the sense that he went there to Argentina to take the photo. But it's also a fiction. There's a lot of work that went into it after that. And what he's done is he's actually reshaped digitally all of the contours of the mountains to follow the vicissitudes of the Dow Jones Index. So what you see, that precipice, that high precipice with the valley, is the 2008 financial crisis. The photo was made when we were deep in the valley over there. I don't know where we are now. This is the Hang Seng Index for Hong Kong, and similar topography, I wonder why. And this is art, right? This is metaphor. But I think the point is that this is metaphor with teeth. And it's with those teeth that I want to propose today that we rethink a little bit about the role of contemporary math, not just financial math, but math in general, that it's transitioned from being something that we sort of extract and derive from the world to something that actually starts to shape it, the world around us and the world inside us, and it's specifically algorithms, which are basically the math that computers use to decide.
So I'm going to talk about work, specifically why people can't seem to get work done at work, which is a problem we all kind of have. But let's sort of start at the beginning. So we have companies and nonprofits and charities and all these groups that have employees or volunteers of some sort. And they expect these people who work for them to do great work. I would hope, at least good work. Let's hopefully, at least it's good work. Hopefully great work. And so what they typically do is they decide that all these people need to come together in one place to do that work. So a company or a charity or an organization of any kind, they typically, unless you're working in Africa, if you're really lucky to do that, but most people have to go to an office every day. And so these companies, they build offices. They go out and they buy a building, or they rent a building, or they lease some space, and they fill this space with stuff. They fill it with tables or desks, chairs, computer equipment, software, internet access, maybe a fridge, maybe a few other things. And they expect their employees or their volunteers to come to that location every day to do great work. It seems like it's perfectly
delighted to be here and to talk to you about a subject dear to my heart, which is beauty. I do the philosophy of art, aesthetics, actually for a living. I try to figure out intellectually, philosophically, psychologically, what the experience of beauty is, what sensibly can be said about it, and how people go off the rails in trying to understand it. Now, this is an extremely complicated subject, in part because the things that we call beautiful are so different. I mean, just think of the sheer variety. A baby's face, Berlioz's Harold in Italy, movies like The Wizard of Oz or the plays of Chekhov, a Central California landscape, a Hokusai view of Mount Fuji, Der Rosenkavalier, a stunning match-winning goal in a World Cup soccer match, Van Gogh's Starry Night, a Jane Austen novel, Fred Astaire dancing across the screen. This brief list includes human beings, natural landforms, works of art, and skilled human actions. An account that explains the presence of beauty in everything on this list is not going to be easy.
I wanted to be a rock star. I dreamed of it, and that's all I dreamed of. I should be more accurate. I wanted to be a pop star. This was in the late 80s. And mostly I wanted to be the fifth member of Depeche Mode or Duran Duran. They wouldn't have me. I didn't read music, but I played synthesizers and drum machines. And I grew up in this little farming town in northern Nevada, and I was certain that's what my life would be. And when I went to college at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, when I was 18, I was stunned to find that there was not Pop Star 101 or even a degree program for that interest. And the choir conductor there knew that I sang and invited me to come and join the choir. And I said, yes, I would love to do that, sounds great. And I left the room and said, no way. The choir people in my high school were pretty geeky, and there was no way I was going to have anything to do with those people. And about a week later, a friend of mine came and said, listen, you've got to join choir. At the end of the semester, we're taking a trip to Mexico, all expenses paid, and the soprano section is just full of hot girls. And so I figured for Mexico and babes, I could do just about anything. And I went to my first day in choir, and I sat down with the basses and sort of looked.
It is a thrill to be here at a conference that's devoted to Inspired by Nature, you can imagine. And I'm also thrilled to be in the foreplay section. Did you notice this section is foreplay? Because I get to talk about one of my favorite critters, which is the western grebe. You haven't lived until you've seen these guys do their courtship dance. I was on Bowman Lake in Glacier National Park, which is a long, skinny lake with sort of mountains upside down in it. And my partner and I have a rowing shell. And so we were rowing, and one of these western grebes came along. And what they do for their courtship dance is they go together, the two of them, the two mates, and they begin to run underwater. They paddle faster and faster and faster until they're going so fast that they literally lift up out of the water and they're standing upright, sort of paddling the top of the water. And one of these grebes came along while we were rowing. And so we're in a scull, and we're moving really, really quickly. And this grebe, I think, sort of mistaked us.
I'm talking to you about the worst form of human rights violation, the third largest organized crime, a $10 billion industry. I'm talking to you about a modern-day slavery. I'd like to tell you the story of these three children, Pranita, Shaheen, and Anjali. Pranita's mother was a woman in prostitution, a prostituted person. She got infected with HIV, and towards the end of her life, when she was in the final stages of AIDS, she could not prostitute, so she sold 4-year-old Pranita to a broker. By the time we got the information, we reached there, Pranita was already raped by 3 men. Shaheen's background I don't even know. We found her in a railway track, raped by many, many men, I don't know how many, but the indications of that on her body was that her intestine was outside her body.
Feminists don't have a sense of humor. Feminists just want to be alone. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Feminists spread vicious lies and rumors. They have a tumor on their funny bone. They say child molestation isn't funny. Ha 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 ha. Rape and degradation's just a crime. Lighten up, ladies. Rampant prostitution, sex for money. What's wrong with that? Can't these chicks do anything but whine? Dance break. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Woohoo!
I'll tell you a little bit about the irrational behavior, not yours, of course, other people's. After being at MIT for a few years, I realized that writing academic papers is not that exciting. I don't know how many of those you read, but it's not fun to read and often not fun to write, even worse to write. So I decided to try and write something more fun. And I came up with an idea that I will write a cookbook. And the title for my cookbook was going to be Dining Without Crumbs, The Art of Eating Over the Sink. And it was going to be a look at life through the kitchen. And I was quite excited about this. I was going to talk about a little bit about research, a little bit about the kitchen. We do so much in the kitchen, I thought this would be interesting. And I wrote a couple of chapters and I took it to MIT Press and they said, cute but not for us, go and find somebody else. I tried other people, and everybody said the same thing, cute, not for us, until somebody said, look, if you're serious about this, you first have to write a book about your research. You have to publish something, and then you'll get the opportunity to write something else. If you really want to do it, you have to do it. So I said, I really don't want to write about my research. I do this all day long. I want to write something.
Sadly, in the next 18 minutes when I do our chat, 4 Americans that are alive will be dead through the food that they eat. My name's Jamie Oliver. I'm 34 years old. I'm from Essex in England. And for the last 7 years, I've worked fairly tirelessly to save lives in my own way. I'm not a doctor. I'm a chef. I don't have expensive equipment or medicine. I use information, education. I profoundly believe that the power of food has a primal place in our homes that binds us to the best bits of life. We have an awful, awful reality right now. America, you're at the top of your game. This is one of the most unhealthy countries in the world. Can I please just see a raise of hands for how many of you have children in this room today? Please put your hands up. Aunties, uncles, you can continue to put your hands up. Aunties and uncles as well? Most of you.
So for any of us in this room today, let's start out by admitting we're lucky. We don't live in the world our mothers lived in, our grandmothers lived in, where career choices for women were so limited. And if you're in this room today, most of us grew up in a world where we have basic civil rights. And amazingly, we still live in a world where some women don't have them. But all that aside, we still have a problem, and it's a real problem. And the problem is this: women are not making it to the top of any profession anywhere in the world. The numbers tell the story quite clearly. 190 heads of state, 9 are women. Of all the people in parliament in the world, 13% are women. In the corporate sector, women at the top, C-level jobs, board seats, tops out at 15–16%. The numbers have not moved since 2002 and are going in the wrong direction. And even in the nonprofit world, a world we sometimes think of as being led by more women, women at the top, 20%. We also have another problem, which is that women face harder choices between professional success and personal fulfillment. A recent study in the U.S.
As an Indian, and now as a politician, about our own country, all this talk about India becoming a world leader, even the next superpower. In fact, the American publishers of my book, The Elephant, the Tiger, and the Cell Phone, added a gratuitous subtitle saying, India, the next 21st century power. And I just don't think that's what India is all about, or should be all about. Indeed, what worries me is, the entire notion of world leadership seems to me terribly archaic. It's redolent of James Bond movies and Kipling ballads. After all, what constitutes a world leader? If it's population, we're on course to top the charts. We will overtake China by 2034. Is it military strength? Well, we have the world's 4th largest army. Is it nuclear capacity? We know we have that. The Americans have even recognized it in an agreement. Is it the economy? Well, we have now the 5th largest economy in the world in purchasing power parity terms, and we continue to grow. When the rest of the world took a beating last year, we grew at 6.7%. But somehow, none of that adds up to me to what I think India really can aim to contribute in the world in this part of the 21st century. And so I wonder, could
There's a great big elephant in the room called the economy. So let's start talking about that. I wanted to give you a current picture of the economy. That's what I have behind myself. But of course, what we have to remember is this. And what we have to think about is when you're dancing in the flames, what's next? So what I'm going to try and do in the next 17 and a half minutes is I'm going to talk first about the flames, where we are in the economy, and then I'm going to take 3 trends that have taken place at TED over the last 25 years and that will take place in this conference, and I will try and bring them together. And I will try and give you a sense of what the ultimate reboot looks like. Those 3 trends are the ability to engineer cells, the ability to engineer tissues, and robots. And somehow it'll all make sense. But anyway, let's start with the economy. There's a couple of really big problems that are still sitting there. One is leverage. And the problem with leverage is it makes the US financial system look like this. So a normal commercial bank has 9 to 10 times leverage. That means for every dollar you deposit it loans.
I date younger men, predominantly men in their 20s. And when I date younger men, I have sex with younger men. And when I have sex with younger men, I encounter very directly and personally the real ramifications of the creeping ubiquity of hardcore pornography in our culture. So in an era where hardcore porn is more freely and widely available on the internet than ever before, and where kids are therefore able to access it at a younger and younger age than ever before, there is an entire generation growing up that believes that what you see in hardcore pornography is the way that you have sex. And this is particularly exacerbated because we live in a puritanical double standards culture where people believe that a teen abstinence campaign will actually work, where parents are too embarrassed to have conversations about sex with their children, and where educational institutions are terrified of being politically incorrect if they pick up those conversations. And so it's not surprising that hardcore pornography de facto has become sex education. Now, as a mature, experienced, confident older
I wrote this poem after hearing a pretty well-known actress tell a very well-known interviewer on television, "I'm really getting into the internet lately. I just wish it were more organized." So, if I controlled the internet, you could auction your broken heart on eBay. Take the money. Go to Amazon. Buy a phone book for a country you've never been to. Call folks at random till you find someone who flirts really well in a foreign language. If I were in charge of the internet, you could MapQuest your lover's mood swings. Hang left at cranky, right at preoccupied, U-turn on silent treatment, all the way back to tongue kissing and good loving. You could navigate and understand every emotional intersection. Some days, I'm as shallow as a baking pan, but I still stretch miles in all directions. If I owned the internet, Napster, Monster, and Friendster.com would be one big website. That way you could listen to cool music while you pretend.
I thought I would think about changing your perspective on the world a bit and showing you some of the designs that we have in nature. And so I have my first slide to talk about the dawning of the universe and what I call the cosmic scene investigation. That is looking at the relics of creation and inferring what happened at the beginning and then following it up and trying to understand it. And so one of the questions that I asked you is, when you look around, what do you see? Well, you see this space that's created by designers and by the work of people, but what you actually see is a lot of material that was already here being reshaped in a certain form. And so the question is, how did that material get here? How did it get into the form it had before it got reshaped, and so forth? It's a question of what's the continuity. So one of the things I look at is, how did the universe begin and shape? What was the whole process in the creation and the evolution of the universe to getting to the point that we have these kind of materials? So that's sort of part, and let me move on then, show you the Hubble Ultra Deep Field. If you look in this picture, what you will see is a lot of dark with some light objects in it. And everything but 4 of these light objects are stars, and you can see them, they're little pluses. This is a star.
I grew up in Europe, and World War II caught me when I was between 7 and 10 years old, and I realized how few of the grown-ups that I knew were able to withstand the tragedies that the war visited on them. How few of them could even resemble a normal, contented, satisfied, happy life once their job, their home, their security was destroyed by the war. So I became interested in understanding what contributed to a life that was worth living. And I tried as a child, as a teenager, to read philosophy and to get involved in art and religion and many other ways that I could see as a possible answer to that question. And finally, I ended up encountering psychology by